שיביתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד, כי מימיני בא למות. לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי. לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי. שיביתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד, כי מימיני בא למות.
Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. The Lord has given and the Lord has taken away. Praise be the name of the Lord. Kol amir kra v'amar ma'akra, kol habasar chatzir v'kol chasto katzitz hasadeh. Yavesh chatzir navel tzitz kirach Adonai noshvabo. Achen chatzir am yavesh chatzir navel tzitz udvar lohina yakum leolam. A voice says, cry out. And I say, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when a wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever. The photos that all of you on live stream just watched are photos that capture the power and essence of Ron. Not the Ron that we saw, unfortunately, over the last 2 years, but the Ron that was blessed to live this life, to walk this earth, to make connections to each and every one of us for his first 65 years. At this time, we're going to call forward Cantor Jackie Raffi, who is going to lead us in Mizmor LeDavid.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, pinot eshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yanaleni. Nafshi yeshover, nafshi yeshover, yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi Shivtecha umishantecha heima yenachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai dishanta vashemen roshi dishanta vashemen roshi dishanta vashemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov achesen yirdefuni ושבתי בבית אדוני. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. יאי לי לי לי, יאי לי לי לי, יאי לי 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 לי. יאי לי לי לי, יאי לי לי לי, יאי לי 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 לי.
The psalmist asked the question, Adonai mi yagur bo halecha mi yishkon bahar kodshecha, who shall live and dwell in your sanctuary? And the psalmist responds, he who lives with integrity, does what is right, and speaks the truth in his heart, who has no slander upon his tongue, who does no evil to his fellow man, who does not reproach his neighbor. In his eyes, a vile person is despised, but he honors those who revere the Lord. He takes an oath even to his own harm and does not change. He does not lend money at usurious interest. He does not take a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things shall stand firm forever. It was the last Shabbat that Ron was able and strong enough to join us on Zoom. I remember it because of the drash that I gave that morning. Looking at him lying in his hospital bed with oxygen attached. Anyone else would have let go by that time, not Ron. If he couldn't join us, it meant the cancer won. And Ron could not bear that. He would not consider that an option. Because throughout his heroic struggle with pancreatic cancer, Ron always fought to be present. First, in synagogue, and then when COVID hit from his sound room at home. It was utterly important for Ron to be in shul. Before cancer, no matter what else was going on in his life, and his life was filled, busy with work, with friends, with obligations and hobbies, he still prioritized being our shaliach tzibor, our conduit for prayer. With purity of heart and spirit, giving forth for himself and his community, with deeply held emotion and an unpretentiousness of expression, Ron sang forth. And now with cancer, shul was Ron's protest against his fate, his determination to live on his terms, something that he had done those previous 66 years. Looking at Ron, listening to his davening, I felt the text I taught then exemplified Ron's approach to life. It began with a question. What is the most important verse in the Torah? Which is, of course, an exercise in futility. How can we limit the essence of Torah to one verse? We cannot. Which is why our sages offered in the debate 4 possible answers, hedging their bets, so to speak. Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your fellow as you love yourself. That was Rabbi Akiva's choice. Ben Azai's was, this is the book of the generations of Adam. On the day God created humans, God created us, B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. Ben Zoma suggested Shema Yisrael. And finally, tagged to the end of the discussion was a 4th opinion, the strangest of them all. From the Torah portion, Pinchas referring to the daily offering brought every morning and evening. As the verse states, the first lamb you shall sacrifice in the morning, and the second lamb you shall sacrifice in the evening. That's the most important verse. Now, the first three choices make sense. All humans are created in God's image. The verse rings out moral rectitude. Each of us is unique, equal, and of infinite value. Thus, by loving every other human being as we love ourselves, we respect the image of God that we see in each other, which we are reminded to do with the recitation of Shema. 3 fundamental ways for how we should conduct our lives. Without question, they define the essence of Ron's being in this world. Every human being deserved and received Ron's respect. He was a mensch because he cared deeply about you and made you feel central in his life. For those of you who thought you were Ron's best friend, closest buddy, favorite relative, most special congregant, it is true, you were. He loved you with all his heart, his soul, and might. He didn't play favorites. When he was with you, you were the only person important to him, fully and with undivided attention. The founder of modern Jewish Musar, or Jewish ethics, Rabbi Israel Salanter, taught that one's own spiritual needs are the other person's material needs. A deeply spiritual person, one of the ways Ron expressed his religiosity was by serving others. Whatever your needs were, they became his needs. Needed your house wired? That became Ron's focus. Needed help with a job connection? Ron knew everyone and made it his business to connect you. Needed some time on the lake away from the world to enjoy the outdoor adventure of a jet ski? Needed somebody to marry you, to bury you, to entertain you, to save you, to feed you? You needed a place to crash for a day, a week, a year, or more? There are more keys to Ron's house scattered throughout the country than even he knew. More people with his garage remote control than space to store things in his garage. His family told of the story of the guy who he had just met who broke his leg, I think playing hockey. Ron took him to the hospital and stayed with him until the leg was cast, and then took him home, and then carried him into his house, and he wasn't even a close friend. Jeff called his home the Underground Railroad for wayward white boys. Ron was at City of Hope twice a month donating platelets. People from all walks of life in these last months begging to visit Ron to show their appreciation for the acts of unmitigated kindness that he showed them. Ron saw you instantiated as the infinite expression of God's face in the world. Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You shall love your fellow as you love yourself. It goes without saying that Ron's family witnessed this firsthand when Ron, at the youthful age of 15, stepped up without being asked by anyone to fill the unfillable shoes of his blessed father, Abi, Zichrono Livracha, when he died so young. While it seems obvious, being that he was the oldest, the firstborn, the prince of the family, it was not an obvious choice at all. Ron had many choices he could have made at that moment. 15 years old, trying to find his own way in life, looking to separate from his younger siblings, but with his beloved mother Irma grieving her husband's death, and Rona, Sue, and Jeff needing support. Ron, without being asked or expected, nevertheless took it upon himself to fill that role. From attending Minyan every morning to say Kaddish for his father, staying afterwards to study Talmud before rushing off to school. Ron even tried but failed to get a waiver to drive before the age of 16 in order to help his mother manage the many needs of his 3 siblings. There was nothing Ron wouldn't do for his family. You can say it was the overwhelming guilt he felt in keeping his mother up for months as a colicky baby, or the fact that no matter how much she fed him, he wouldn't be satisfied. But more likely, it was the simple fact that you cannot claim to respect the image of God in others if you do not practically love others. And Ron loved, not necessarily with words, but with actions and with deeds. A pattern that extended throughout his life. To his in-laws, Rob, Gordy, and Rhonda, to his nieces and nephews, to cousins, to practically anyone who would ask, and always with unassuming humility. Which takes me to the fourth statement made by Shimon ben Pazi, the one that is most perplexing, that cannot possibly compare to the dramatic and impressive verses chosen by the other sages. How does his statement about the daily offering of a lamb brought morning and evening compare with the seemingly all-encompassing statements of the previous three sages? He's talking about mundane daily sacrifice, while the others talk of fundamental teachings. Here is the 16th century commentator, the Maharal's answer. The verse emphasizes that a person should serve God with absolute consistency on a perpetual basis, like a servant. Just as a servant does not veer from serving his master, but rather serves him continuously, so should we serve God. The message is clear. We transform our lives and others through continual daily commitment. Believing in great religious declarations, we are all created in the image of God. We should love one another as ourselves. Proclaiming God's oneness, they're essential. However, only through a continuous and consistent commitment, day in and day out, can such belief manifest itself. Ron was a deeply spiritual person. He was a religious man. Kashrut was integral to his belief, and all of his friends knew it. He loved to talk and teach about it. And while it never limited his social life, everyone respected and accommodated him. They respected him even more, in fact, for his integrity, for his daily commitments to his religious ideals. Attendance at synagogue for Ron was non-negotiable. And in fact, Ron would scramble and sometimes drive through the night to arrive on time, ready to lead his Shomrei community, which in and of itself epitomizes Ron's approach to life. His stability and perpetual dedication, which is at the heart of a moral and spiritual life. Ron was a Shabbat regular, every week sitting in the back next to his lifelong friend Barbara. And when we found ourselves some 18 years ago without a cantor on staff, Ron, along with a number of members, stepped up, offering to lead and help lead services. What started as occasional became regular. What became regular became expected, both of himself and of us. There was a comfort in seeing Ron on the bima, in hearing him lead us. Comfort not just because of his beautiful voice, his purity of spirit, his unassuming manner, but because one saw the efforts that Ron invested in becoming Arlei Chazan. Like everything he did in life, Ron devoted himself, spending countless hours learning, practicing, perfecting his craft. As he approached his profession as a voiceover actor, as he approached his hobbies, boating and jet skiing, hockey, and other interests we'll soon hear about, as he approached everything in life, Ron was a perpetual learner. Repeated daily actions become habits. Habits, in turn, become ingrained character traits, and character traits eventually transform the person. For Ron, Judaism, as everything in life, was not about proclamations or abstractions. It was about daily commitment as the anchor of a spiritual life. Gadol hanehene miyigo yoter mirei shamayim. A person who enjoys his own labor is greater than the one who fears heaven. to be consumed by one's life, one's work and living life with sincerity and quality, with balance and integrity for the end product, and with respect for the one who engages you. This was Ron's gift. And with generosity of spirit, Ron shared that gift with others. Ron did not live to appropriate, to dominate, or to amass. Yes, he may have had his toys, but he loved to give, without any consciousness that he was giving, without any feeling that he deserved any tribute for what he did. Was Ron a saint? No, and he would not have tolerated even the idea. He could be stubborn, lose his temper quickly, see things out of the narrowest of views, but those weaknesses were his strengths when it came to applying them to injustices, to those who needed his help, to making this world better. Which was one of the many reasons why Ron was devastated when he received the news. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. But like he must have been while playing hockey on the ice, Ron was tenacious. Ron fought heroically. He refused to give in. He refused to give up. Ron loved being alive, loved telling jokes, some rather off color, loved being in nature, loved Vegas and video poker, loved family and friends, and leading services for his Shomrei Torah synagogue community. Each time I visited him these last weeks, he held on, stubborn as always, damned to face the angel of death. Somehow, as weak as he was, when I would enter his room, he would pick up his head and find the strength in that booming, resonant bass voice of his and sing out, "Rabbi." We would hold hands as I would recite or sing psalms with him. Even last week, he tried mightily to hum along. And Irma heard that singing in the other room. Each time I got up to leave, Ron would look at me and he would say, "Don't go. Hang on just a little longer." And I did, because that is how Ron defined his relationship to our community these last decades, and it was how he defined our relationship with each other for the last 18 years. It was more than whenever I needed Ron, he was there. Shabbat evening, Shabbat morning, holidays, weekdays, preparing his shtick for Simchat Torah, narrating for a Purim spiel, recording something for the synagogue, overseeing the sound system and the social hall upgrades, working with Porf, mentoring Jackie, partnering with Erez. More than a colleague, Ron was my friend. He was the person that I have in my 28 years in the rabbinate worked longest with, side by side, sharing intimate moments on the bima and off the bima. Ron was someone I could trust with the most confidential of matters. He was wise, understanding, and insightful. He taught me about devotion, volunteerism, and selfless acts for the sake of a community you love. More than once over the last months, Ron stated with all sincerity and honesty, which was the only way Ron knew how to be, that we gave him more than he ever received from us. Intellectually, I might have argued that with him, but in the moment, in the tears, I felt so blessed to have provided the means to satisfy his soul. You and I know our truth, that Ron Snow, a prince of a man, gave unreservedly to all of us. His legacy will be the stories that we share about this mensch of a man, this soulful human being, whose voice and demeanor, his kindness and generosity brought so much grace and dignity to our community, who uplifted our souls and allowed our prayers to rise higher. Don't leave me, Ron said. I'm not leaving you, Ron. You will never be far from my thoughts and my heart. Your voice will always be the fourfold song that Rabbi Cook wrote, about which will conclude my thoughts of you today. The fourfold song. There is one who sings the song of his own life, and in himself he finds everything, his full spiritual satisfaction. There is another who sings the song of his people. He leaves the circle of his own individual self because he finds it without sufficient breadth, without an idealistic basis. He aspires towards the heights, and he attaches himself with a gentle love to the whole community of Israel. Together with her, he sings her songs. He feels grieved in her afflictions and delights in her hopes. He contemplates noble and pure thoughts about her future and probes with love and wisdom her inner spiritual essence. There is another who reaches toward more distant realms, and he goes beyond the boundary of Israel to sing the song of man. His spirit extends to the wider vistas of the majesty of man generally and his noble essence. He aspires towards man's general goal and looks forward to his higher perfection. From this source of life, he draws the subjects of his meditation and study, his aspirations and his visions. Then there is the one who rises towards wider horizons until he links himself with all existence, with all God's creatures, with all worlds, and he sings his song with all of them. It is of one such as this that tradition has said that whoever sings a portion of song each day is assured of having a share in the world to come. And then there is one who rises with all these songs in one ensemble, and they all join voices. Together they sing their songs with beauty. Each one lends vitality and life to the other. They are sounds of joy and gladness, sounds of jubilation and celebration, sounds of ecstasy and holiness. The song of the self, the song of the people, the song of the man, the song of the world, all merge in him at all times, in every hour. Chazan Ron Snow, you sang that fourfold song for each and every one of us. May your memory and your soul be forever a blessing to all of us as we say, Amen. We were blessed to work with Ron. I was blessed, as was Cantor Jackie Rafi and Rabbi Era Sherman, and so they are going to come forward and share some words, followed by Ron's beloved longtime friend and Rabbi Hanan Klaristenfeld.
As I grasp to find the words that I believe could do justice to Ron, and I don't believe any words ever can, I find myself turning to a teaching from Pirkei Avot, a text that offers guiding principles for living a good, ethical life. Early on in chapter 1, we read the following: Aseh lecha rav, ukne lecha chaver. Make for yourself a teacher, and acquire for yourself a friend. Our sages knew the importance of having a teacher, a mentor. But perhaps by adding in the very same sentence that we should acquire a friend, they were pointing to something more rare, an exceptional gift in one's lifetime, a great teacher in your life whom you are also blessed to call a friend. Cantor Ron Snow, my mentor, my teacher, my dear friend. Ron was the best kind of teacher, the one who teaches not by lecturing or displaying authority, but rather teaches by example, graciously and generously sharing his gifts and knowledge, because sharing and helping are simply core to who he is. And in that process, Ron shared the beautiful gift of his friendship. I'd like to share with you some of the things I learned from Ron over these past 3.5 years of working closely with him. First, Ron taught me how to daven. Sure, I learned Nusach in cantorial school, but Ron taught me how to daven with soul. He taught me concretely, many times sitting with me and teaching me melodies and texts I didn't know, or sending me recordings. He was supportive and encouraging, paying attention to and always sharing a kind word about my progress. Ron also taught me by example. By watching him and listening to him over these many months, I learned what it means to daven with sincerity and humility. He was a true shaliach tzibor, a messenger of the prayers of our congregation. When he chanted prayer, I felt I could see the colorful, deep hues of each word he chanted, rising to heaven along with his beautiful voice. Ron taught me something else that I could never learn in school. He actually coined the phrase himself, and I'll always carry it with me. He called it practical cantoritics. This was referring to all the behind the bima, practical wisdom of how to handle difficult situations gracefully. I remember countless phone calls I made to Ron on my drives home, rattling off this or that question or this or that stressor, and Ron calmly offering his sage, balanced perspective and comforting advice. Soon I came to learn that Ron's version of practical cantoritics was the best kind. It was how to see and bring out the best in people, how to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, how to give selflessly and graciously, how to be a team player. As a friend, Ron taught me about musicians and cultural icons of past decades, always chuckling when I stopped him mid-sentence and said, "Wait, who's that?" And with his patient smile, Ron would share a touching story to help imprint this famous person or that classic TV show in my mind. Ron and I shared many laughs as Bima buddies. One Simchat Torah, we had a joke competition while we chanted a prayer. Ron chanted his lines with Ashkenazic pronunciation, and I chanted mine with Sephardic pronunciation. We kept this joke going between us during the high holidays. Ron would point out to me, "It's Besefer Chaim Ufarnasa Tova." And I would say, no, Ron. It's Besefer Chaim Ufarnasa Tova. And with a laugh and twinkle in his eye, Ron would say, "My dear, let's see if anybody sings it like that." I also learned by example from the beautiful, selfless, humble way that Ron gave of himself to others, to his community, to his family and friends, and to strangers. Ron gave from a genuine place of just wanting to make things better for everyone. And Ron's profound kindness did not diminish, even when his health did. For our first Songstruck concert at Shomrei Torah, when Ron was healthy, he spent hours working with the tech team to ensure that the sound would be optimal. For the second concert the following year, when he was sick and limited in his ability to be as hands-on as before, he still wanted to help as much as he could, so he recorded his beautiful voice in advance as the opening greeting of the evening. At the beginning of this pandemic, when we began to live stream services from home and I had to navigate a new world of tech equipment, even though Ron was not feeling well, he researched microphones and webcams and shared his vast tech knowledge just to help me get set up. Earlier this year, Ron heard me say in passing that I was having trouble using headphones and charging my phone at the same time. So a few weeks later, for my birthday in March, Ron got me a special adapter that allowed me to do both. These are all just little examples, and there are endless more, not only from me, but from the multitudes of other lives that Ron touched. But I want to share what moves me the most as I sit here and think of Ron. Ron, in his profound humility and graciousness, made space for others to grow and shine. Ron beautifully preserved, elevated, and shared the traditional nusach and melodies of our community that were so dear to his heart. And at the same time, He embraced new music enthusiastically and with an open heart and mind. Though Ron's voice was and is forever irreplaceable, Ron made ample room for my voice to join his, and he celebrated when I did. It was Ron's idea to do the back and forth davening with me during certain prayers. I can never again chant Kaddish Shalem without hearing Ron's melodic, deep, bass voice chanting every other paragraph with me. Ron also introduced me to many modern Jewish songs like Joey Weisenberg's Shochein Ad and Rabbi Creditor's Olam Chesed Yibaneh, and then he encouraged me to lead them on my own. Aseh lecha rav ukne lecha chaver. Make for yourself a teacher and acquire for yourself a friend. Ron, you were the most wonderful teacher and friend in life. But I know I will continue to be inspired by your legacy for years to come. You have taught me how to be a better mentor, teacher, and friend to others. And though no one can come close to your level of humility and selflessness, I have been and will continue to be inspired by you to lead with more humility and to give more selflessly. I got to share with Ron how much he taught me and what an impact he had not only on my cantorial path, but on my whole life 2 weeks ago, which was the last time I saw and spoke to Ron in person. But luckily, I got to see Ron one more time, though in a different way. On Wednesday night, Ron visited my dream. I was looking through the open front door of my house, and a car was driving by slowly until it stopped. I peered closely to see who was behind the wheel. It was Ron. Excited, I ran up to the car window. There he was, smiling his warm, amused smile, still looking thin from his battle with cancer, but his face bright and full of life. I exclaimed, "Ron, it's you! I can't believe it! You're feeling better? You're feeling well enough to drive?" He looked happy and he replied, "I'm going home." In that moment, I didn't understand. I knew he'd already been home, on hospice all this time. Even though it didn't make sense, I was so excited because I thought, it's a miracle. Ron made it. He's healing. He's going to stay with us. I woke up with my heart full, sensing for a moment that Ron was going to be okay. Ron passed away that morning. And when I heard, I couldn't help believing that maybe he had come to say goodbye. And now you're home, Ron. Your soul is at peace, singing with the angels in Olam Haba'a. The Talmud says those who sing in this world will sing in the world to come. Cantor Snow, it fills my heart with joy to imagine you singing in your eternal home.
We say Ma'alin b'kodesh v'lo moridin, that we should only go up in holiness and not down. So I'm going to start at a low level and tell a pretty unsanctified story. But it was 2013, and I know there's many Michigan fans here and only one Syracuse fan here. And if you're but if you remember in 2013, Syracuse and Michigan made the Final Four. And Jessica Green, the executive director at the time, invited me and our good friend Mel Weiss of blessed memory, also from Detroit, and Cantor Ron Snow to watch the Final Four at her house. There was one little conflict because that evening I was in charge of the membership Havdalah at Shomrei Torah. And as the game wore on and became closer, I didn't know what to do. Ron knew that I was a rules follower, and he said, "Come on, kid, look at this game. A membership Havdalah? Call Rabbi Kamers and tell him you're sick." So I'm sorry. I don't know how many new members we lost that night. But literally just sitting on the couch and watching the game with Ron and Jessica and Mel, It's a story of relationships that I'll never forget. And there was another game I used to play with Ron that I'm assuming many of you probably have played before. A few years ago, I was in San Francisco for the first time in my life, and I was touring with my wife, and we got back to the hotel, and I turned on the TV just to see what was going on in the world, and there was the voice. I texted Ron, and I said, "Ron, are you the voice of Disc Lights?" He responded like this. I saw the text last night. I can't do the voice, but it sounded like, "And it's from Bell and Howell, a name you can trust." 2 minutes later, "And don't forget that solar conversion technology." I don't know who was getting more of a kick of it, that I knew the guy on TV, or that he knew that he was actually on TV. When I think of Ron, I know that he went into the right profession, not only because of that magical voice, but the fact that he never wanted to be in the forefront. And yet that voice, simple, gorgeous, pure, and angelic, the voice is the presence that he gave to all of us. I'm going to quote a different teaching by Rav Kook, the first Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Israel. And he taught Hayashan Yitchadesh Vehechadesh Yitkadesh, that we must renew the old and make the new sacred. And that's how I see Ron as a cantor, as a friend, and as a human being. Even before I came to STS in 2009, there was a friend of mine living on the West Coast, and he said, if you become a rabbi and go to the West Coast, you need to go to Shomrei Torah Synagogue. This guy, he really, really knows how to daven. And there I was in 2009, as a newly minted rabbi, with my new family at Shomrei Torah. And I immediately recognized his generosity because, to be honest, without the fact that he truly did his profession for free, allowed me to be a rabbi at Shomrei Torah Synagogue. I was so privy to see the special relationship that he had with Rabbi Kamras, a respect of clergy, and also a respect of being part of the Klei Kodesh. Sitting next to him on the bima for years, I'll always remember his awe. When he would look at a young bar mitzvah student, they would stand up and they would daven shacharit, and he would whisper to me, "We got to keep this kid." Or there'd be a Torah trainer, a high school student, who now is training the next generation of kids, and he would look at me and he goes, "I never thought in a million years that kid would actually do it." It's because he took such pride in the products that were coming out of this community. And my favorite question before the high holidays: who's going to be my partner in crime to sing Ata V'chartanu with me? Ata V'chartanu mikol hahamim. It wasn't just him, but always he would choose 2 or 3 youth with beautiful voices, creating that harmony that made our holidays. You know, in rabbinical school, you're taught at times how to do life cycle events, but you're generally also taught you make that separation between the family and your job. It's your job to officiate, not to celebrate or not to mourn. But every wedding, every bris or baby naming, every special needs bar mitzvah or funeral, I would look in the corner of my eye, and Ron never saw that advice, because his tears would always stream down his face, knowing the sanctity he was bringing to our community at that moment. He literally wore the love of Shomrei on his sleeve, and he taught us to do that together. And it was Ron who welcomed me with open arms, taught me the ropes of Shabbat under the stars, the magical melodies of STS, which I soon learned really originated in Detroit. He taught me, as his Michigan marching band instructor taught him, I don't remember the line exactly, but never be late. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. I have no idea what that last part went, but basically, I think he was saying, if you're late, don't show up again. And that's why for 5 years, like clockwork, Ron would pick me up on the top of Scarborough Peak in his pickup truck that I got my 10-foot ladder to jump into 15 minutes before the service would begin. And those 15 minutes I'll cherish for the rest of my life. We would kibitz as I sat at the foot of my teacher and my friend. He taught me how to entertain and educate at the same time in a Passover Seder, how to lead a meaningful Yizkor service one day and the next day pull out the greatest shtick on earth for Simchas Torah. It's not only what he lived for, but we live for it as well. And what I loved about Ron was he followed Rav Kook's teaching perfectly. Did he love tradition? Absolutely. He was a man of it. And yet he had the prophetic vision and openness to ask himself, what will the next generation of Jewish music be like? Can we really sing Lecha Dodi to the Beatles and the Beach Boys? He truly took the words on those pages. He made them new again. And when something new came his way, he knew how to sanctify it. When I heard the news that Ron had received his diagnosis, I was heartbroken like everybody else. And Ron told me that he was receiving medical treatment just down the street from where I live. And so I asked him if I could visit. I remember walking into my first meeting, seeing him lying on the bed. We did our kibitzing, but before leaving, I asked for a favor. I asked if I could do a Misha Berach. He simply started to cry. I watched in his eyes and told him that day how grateful all of us are that the prayers that he sent our way over the many years shepherded us under his wings. And now it was time for us to do the same for him. As the last year and a half have gone by, technology being a miracle, as all of you know, since I left STS over 6 years ago, I don't miss a Shabbat service online. And so I keep tuning in. I kept hoping to get a glimpse of Ron, the spice of his voice, his smile and soul. And I watched that same service that Rabbi Kamras mentioned. His participation first as he stood on the bima over these last high holidays. And I watched even confined to a hospital bed. He couldn't be with Shomrei, tubes and wires hooked up. But there was one more wire there, the most important. That of a microphone. That of his voice to our hearts. I want to conclude this morning with the words of the tefillah that we sing on Rosh Hashanah, a melody I learned from Ron, but whose words epitomize what we feel today. V'chol maminim shehu el emunah. Shehu, shehu, shehu. And all who believe in a faithful God. This is a very challenging poem of belief, but as we gaze into this messy and broken world, we read this prayer as a proclamation that one day we will once again discover light in darkness, a time that we can truly call out to our deepest yearnings. Ron, may the voice you left in this world continue to ring out in heaven above. And today, may your voice pierce our hearts, lift us up and strengthen our souls, and continue all of us to inspire the holy work you dedicated yourself in this Kehillah Kedusha, the sacred community of Shomrei Torah. Yehi zichro baruch. Ron, may your memory bless us for all time. Amen.
It's up to you, yeah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Kamras, Rabbi Sherman, Cantor Jackie, for your beautiful and comforting words. And I want the three of you to know how much Ronnie loved and cared for you all, and how often he spoke about you, and how much he cherished his friendship with the three of you. I'd like to share some of my personal experiences with Ronnie over the last 50 years. But before I begin, and I'm going to do my best to do this, I want to take a moment to speak to Ronnie's family. Tanta Irma, Roni and Rob, Sue and Gordy, Jeff and Rhonda. How precious it is for Barbara and myself to be considered part of your extended family. I know you all grew up with Barbara and the Harris family, and I'm so deeply appreciative that you include me as well. Your extended visits to Ron from Detroit have meant the world to him. And while it may have been difficult for him to say that to you directly, he certainly was able to say it to me. In particular, I'd like to say to Jeff and Rhonda, your devotion, hard work, support, and care for Ronnie over this extended period of time of his illness has been exemplary and greatly appreciated by each and every one of us. In doing so, you not only took care of your brother, but also performed one of the most important mitzvot to the entire family sitting before me. Thank you from the bottom of all our hearts. And I know that Ronnie felt and feels so grateful to each and every one of you. Finally, Ronnie wanted me to say to all of you who are out there on Zoom that he loved all of you so greatly, appreciated the profound outpouring of love and cards and emails and texts and visits, and especially your prayers. And one more thing. While I'm going to be speaking these words and emotions and sentiment for Ronnie, I want you to know that they're also coming from my wife Barbara's heart and soul as well. Okay, that was the easy part. I don't really want to speak, to be honest. Ronnie, I don't really want to be here today. I told you so some weeks ago, or to be part of this moment. I tried to get out of it thinking that COVID would make it impossible to be here at your graveside. I kept imagining that this is some dream or hallucination or a Netflix drama, or Ronnie, one of your mortuary commercials or voiceovers. It just doesn't compute for me. Even after all this time watching you fight and fight and fight, and fight so hard and struggle. But you know something? I finally understand the Torah's narrative. When Sarah, our matriarch, dies, the Torah gently tells us that Abraham came to utilize her, and then he wept. It's odd. When someone you cherish, you love, that you've spent your life with has passed, you cry, you weep, you collapse, you fall apart, and then you can write a eulogy. Now I finally understand, Ronnie. So I sat with you at your bedside on Thanksgiving morning. You had just passed. Jeff and Rhonda were busy taking care of the brutally painful and difficult arrangements. Tanta Irma, your mom, and I just sat, our arm around each other, and we held you, we kissed you, and we told you how much you were loved and how much you'd be missed. And we did our very best to comfort each other. But you know what's strange? I didn't cry. I just couldn't. It was too unreal. This can't be happening. It's not supposed to be happening. This is a movie. But when I sat down finally to put these words on paper, to speak about my friend and brother, my God, did I weep and cry and scream and curse, because then I knew it was real. You see, I've known Ronnie since he was 17 years old. 50 years ago, indeed last Monday was his 67th birthday. I met him on the very day I proposed to Barbara and placed an engagement ring on her finger. Afterwards, Barbara's family gathered around with l'chaims and blessings and shouts of joy. Zeta Lou, Avery, Hartley, Shirley, and then a family friend who claimed to be sort of a family member, and he called himself the Snowman. Even then, at age 17, Ronnie, you were a handful. A stud, cool as a cucumber, witty, bright, and yes, could be opinionated and sometimes a little stubborn. But you know, when you got ready to leave the Harris home that night, you cornered me in the living room, and with that cocky look and smug smile on your face, you said, "Look, you better behave, man. Now we're mishbocha." At our Ofruf some months later at the Young Israel, you joined in the davening and brought me up to the Amud to join you. Ronnie, you knew I couldn't keep a tune or carry a note, But all that mattered to you was that now we're mishpacha. The next night at our wedding, you joined with my fraternity brothers singing the AEPI famous drinking song. You sang louder than anyone else, and you wanted all of us to know that the next morning you were leaving to the University of Michigan. Once again, as you walked out of the simcha, you embraced me. Hey, bud, we're really bros now, mishpacha forever. You see, of course, and you all know, for Ronnie, family and friends are sacred and cherished and last forever. Forever. No, Ronnie. Forever means a long time. Lots of years. And in my head replays the song Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Ronnie's favorite tune. Yes, Ronnie, I remember the strict orders that you gave me. No, they were commands. You were still able to speak, not well, but you conveyed your message loud and clear. It was so darn hard to talk to you about this. And of course, you made a joke out of it. I asked you about this moment and my sharing a few words with the hundreds or thousands of people who would gather on Zoom. And your response was, Hanan, really? You a few words? Impossible. But then, trying desperately to change the conversation, you asked, how's the Tesla treating you? Have you ever figured out how to charge it? Not really. Come on, Ronnie, this isn't a joke. We're talking about your funeral and your passing. Yeah, I know, he said. I'm leaving. I got up from the chair and sat on the edge of your hospital bed and held your hand. And finally he whispered, please, don't get too personal. You know how I am. I promise I'm not going to talk about our personal and private conversations or even about the kind of person that you are. I don't have to. Everyone here knows. They all know you, have been inspired by you, and they love you. I don't need to repeat your virtues or your peccadillos. We know them so well. But I do want to share a particular intimate moment from several weeks ago when I came to visit you. You were terribly uncomfortable and in a great deal of pain. And so we were able to shift you in the bed so you were sitting up now. The terrible pain that was causing you such agony temporarily stopped. I was alone with you for well over an hour, and I watched you begin to transform. It was as if all the barriers, all the armor, all the defenses faded away. And looking at you at that moment, all I could see was my inner light, your powerful, powerful spiritual energy shining and emanating from within you. It was overwhelming. I had never seen you like that before. Stripped naked, so vulnerable, so open, but so filled with love. I said, Ronnie, I love you so very much. We all do. And I miss you. We all miss you. And like a radiant golden Buddha emanating energy, you simply smiled and said casually, love you too. And you can't imagine how much I love all of you and miss each and every one out there. I knew at that moment that you were beginning your transition, that your deeper self, your holy neshama, your soul, was beginning to elevate, to release itself from the klipa, the shell of your physical body. The truth is, Ronnie, I don't think you could ever imagine how much we already miss you. None of us will ever be able to listen to a Rosh Chodesh benching without thinking of you and your special nigunim, your tunes and melodies that lifted each one of us to the very heavens. Never ever will any of us hear a Hineni chanted on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, without seeing you, Ronnie, dressed in your kittel and talis, humbly and proudly walking down the aisle of our shul. Your deep voice reverberating through our bodies and opening up our hearts. or your prayer for rain on Sukkot, your unique rendition of Hallel on Pesach, bringing in the tunes from so many of our favorite Haggadah songs. We'll never have a Purim without remembering your kibbutzing and your carrying on and your subtle wry humor. But Ronnie, for me and my family, there will never be a Shabbos lunch without feeling your absence, an empty chair at our Shabbos table. You see, for 20 years you sat with us, you ate with us, you lectured us, you learned, you transformed our Shabbos into a Mikdash Me'at, a holy and sacred place. We argued, we debated, we laughed, we learned Torah and Talmud. You educated us about cars and politics and every damn electronic device that existed in this world. I tried to talk about the Parsha, the Torah portion of the week, and sometimes you would find a way to tie it into one of your outrageous or risque commercials, and we would all fall out of our chairs in hysterics. Often you got angry with me for challenging your opinion, for crossing the line, and speaking way too personally around the table. But ultimately you forgave. But let me make it crystal clear to everyone. It wasn't the words or the topics. It was something entirely different. It was the Ruach, the spiritual energy, the intimacy that touched us all so deeply around our Shabbos table. At our last Shabbos lunch together, when you were ill but still were able to come for Shabbat, you questioned me about what the rabbis believed was the most sacred, the most meaningful, and the most important mitzvah of the 613 mitzvot. And I initially said, well, of course, chesed, loving kindness, seeking justice, walking humbly with God. No, you weren't satisfied with that answer. I could see that you were already writhing in pain, but you still gave me a dirty look and pushed me further. Come on, Hanan, what's the single most important mitzvah? And Ronnie, I looked you in the eyes and said, it's Levayas Hames, Ronnie. Care for the dying, escorting the body after death. There is no more important mitzvah, and there is no more intimate experience than that. You stared at me, and I stared at you for a long time. No words were spoken. They didn't need to be. We both understood. So on Thanksgiving Day, after standing vigil with your mom, the mortuary finally came to pick up your klipa, your shell, your withered body. But Ronnie, that's all they took. Not your soul. Your precious soul had already ascended past the heavenly courts. And I, your bro, followed your wishes, walking behind the gurney, your talis and your kittel and kippah in my hand, and escorted your body to the waiting ambulance. I couldn't imagine a more intimate or greater gift than that. It's so funny, Ronnie. Your very favorite time of the year was at the end of Chodesh Cheshvan and the beginning of Chodesh Kislev. Cheshvan, the month that just passed us, is the only month without a Jewish holiday. And Kislev is the month of miracles, the month of Hanukkah, the month of light. It is the time of year that the rabbis teach us the Mashiach is likely to come. How bashert, how meaningful that this is when you chose to leave us. And I have no doubt that when the time finally comes for the Mashiach, Ronnie, it will be your booming voice that we'll all hear from the heavens, beckoning us and welcoming us home. May your precious soul be bound in the bond of everlasting life, and let us all say. Thank you.
So for those who are gathered here, it's going to be a little bit challenging, but it will be on the recording. Only one of Ron's dearest buddies, and there are so many of you that wanted to speak, that wished to speak, and God willing, you'll be able to share your words at the Shiva House Sunday through Thursday. But we're going to turn to the live broadcast and listen to the pre-recorded words of Tommy Nast as he shares these words. And then here we're going to conclude and live stream with the words of Ronnie's brother, Jeff.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tommy Nast, and I'm sure you're as heartbroken as I am in losing our dear Ron Snow. When it comes to Ron and the start of our friendship, I go back to 1984 when our paths crossed, joining the same beer league hockey team. And who would have thought that the two of us would be teammates for the next 4 decades? That fantastic sport was a common thread to so many amazing friends that we introduced each other to over the years. Now I'll come back to hockey in just a moment. First and foremost, I want to extend my deepest condolences to Ron's amazing family who've been by his side through this horrible ordeal and have seen him suffer. It's just been horrific. I especially want to thank Jeff and Rhonda, whose love for Ron was as powerful an example of love for family that I've ever seen, to always be as warm, welcoming, and loving to so many of Ron's friends who visited him during the past few months is something I'll never forget and that I'll always cherish. I'd like to touch on some of the wonderful traits that Ron shared with so many of us. There was never a person who was more willing to help his friends at a moment's notice than Ron. There was never a person who accepted everybody regardless of what faults we possessed. There was never anybody who was more loyal to friends and family. There was never anybody who stood up for what he believed in constantly and would love to engage in rational discussions to make that case. And there was never anybody more fun to have a night on the town with, and trust me, we had plenty of nights on the town. There was never anybody better to be on the ice with, win or lose. There was never anybody one could trust more. There was never anybody that had more compassion when compassion was needed. There was never anybody with more passion if it was for just a fun time at the lake, on a jet ski, at a Vegas casino, at a Kings Red Wings game, at a karaoke night, or in a place he was so loved, his temple. I learned so much about the importance of Ron's Jewish faith and how he was always so willing to hear thoughts on other faiths. And there was nothing better than having Ron at our traditional Christmas Eves and our Thanksgiving celebrations. And losing Ron on Thanksgiving brings him memories of my wife, Luann, who always loved to make a kosher bird and sides so Ron could feast with us as well. There was never anybody I enjoyed sharing a birthday party with. The Key Club, the Canyon Club, my home, and more recently, the bashes at Ron's house were some of the best times of my life. And I believe Ron's too. And that voice. Oh, that voice. Ron's work with that powerful, booming voice was something I was in awe of. And not going to lie, I was a little jealous of, too, being an old radio guy who also did a voiceover or two in the past. I can tell you that if you believe in heaven, God just got the greatest voice that all there will hear. And sing? Luann and I, along with our dear friends Rick and Diane Monroe, were awestruck when we were attending a tremendous event at Ron's temple when they were honoring him. And we never knew he could be Frank Sinatra and Michael Bublé combined. And I mean, he did do a great karaoke version of Spinning Wheel, But that evening, his star shined so bright, and we were so blessed at that fantastic night. And now back to hockey, that common thread. And there's so many men and women that took to the ice, be it with the Blue Jays, the Buzzards, or the Benders. They all loved Ron and that competitive spirit he brought to every game. I wish I could name every teammate, but I have a feeling that when it's safe to do a bigger tribute to celebrate Ron's life in person, so many of his teammates are going to come out in force, and they'll be able to share their stories of their favorite defense partner, Snowy. In closing, I want to share that on behalf of my wife, Luann, my daughter, Allie, and my son, Nick, who are also crushed at losing Uncle Ron, that our love for Ron will last forever and ever. He'll always be an eternal part of my soul, and I thank him from the bottom of my heart for being the friend and brother that he was constantly. Ron, I love you forever.
Thank you, Tommy, for those beautiful words representing so many of the communities that Ron was a part of. And Ron, in his own unique fashion, always able to keep apart and separate those various communities of his life. To conclude our funeral here, but certainly not to conclude the opportunity for tributes to this beloved human being, Ron Snow, his brother Jeff.
Be closer, okay. As you just witnessed, this is a pretty tough act to follow. Rabbi, thank you for your words. I think you stole everything I was about to say, including all those Jewish passages which I had written, so.
The more that we repeat the words of one, the better it is.
No, it's a master class, and there's two reasons I went to shul when I did, and Ron went to shul for all of us, quite frankly, and I know the rest of my family goes a lot more than I did, but I would go for two reasons. One was to see Ron, and the other was to hear the rabbi speak. And as you can see, that's a very special place. And Jackie, it's like the voice of an angel. I'm sure he's hearing it. Boy, he loved you. He really did. And for him to have respect for the people who inhabited the Bema, that was saying something. Because there was a time when he didn't like what was going on, and we all know what that was. It doesn't need to be named, but he truly, truly loved hearing you and seeing you. And I didn't realize how much he tutored you, and because your talent is extraordinary. And Rabbi Sherman, wherever you went, oh, you're another one that he just had such great respect for you, and we felt very fortunate that you were there when we were members, and our daughter was going to Hebrew school there, and I was bat mitzvahed there, and what a dream. And of course, the reason we were there was because of Ron. And I've met people on Facebook through other people, and to find out they know Rabbi Kamaris, and they know the rabbi intern, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's remarkable. And Kenny, wherever you went, thank you for being here. I know Ron loved his Shabbos. Every Shabbos he spent at Kenny's house. If they were in town, he was at their house, eating dinner and eating lunch and recapping, maybe having a conversation around the politics or the verse and chapter, learning Torah, and just having a conversation about whatever, having a conversation. I had many of those with Ron. Ron could have a good conversation, and we didn't always agree, but we always had a good conversation. I heard a lot of consistent tones. One of the things that I continually hear, of course, is what a wonderful man Ron was. And it didn't come from nowhere. It came from our mother. We grew up in a family that taught us unconditional love. And Ron took that to the max. He literally opened his house to anyone who wanted to be there. I would find out later people had his remotes to his garage. I don't know how many remotes are out there, but if you have them, please bring them back eventually. There's keys everywhere, coast to coast, I'm sure. I remember coming home back to Ron's house. He was in the hospital, and there was a wet towel over the shower, and wondering where'd that come from? What the heck? And we were later to find out that one of his friends was in town, and Ron, of course, told him, "Yeah, no problem, just go, use the house." So we owe all these plaudits start with our family, and my father, for the short time on earth, he was a very he was a very kind man. He had a big heart also, and was taken way too early. I still don't understand that one either. He was sick my whole life too. But we were given the gift to be raised and be good people and learn the important values of people. And it served us all well, I think. I know he appreciated Sue and Roni being there. I know it was tough from being far away, but I know you did your best, and he knew it too. And he loved everybody. And Rhonda, I am so fortunate to have you as my partner, and you stepped up like unbelievable. And Ron was so pleased, and he trusted you with everything, literally everything, and you know that, I know. It could be a challenge, but he knew, and we were there, and, people would tell us how much they appreciated it, or what a great job we're doing, or, that's so wonderful. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what does other people do? I mean, really, well, he was my brother. I just hope I lived my life trying to give back to him, because he gave so much to me over the years. It took me a long time to find myself, to become the success that I was able to become, thankfully, and hope to continue. But Ron was there when I wasn't such a success. And yet, when I didn't have money, I would go somewhere and he would pay for whatever. He didn't question it. When I needed to sleep in his house, I slept in his house. I slept in Roni's house. I slept in everybody's house. There's probably half the people out here I probably slept in your house. I still have the keys. I'll give them back in a moment. I want to make sure to, at the beginning, to thank all the caregivers and all the people and the work that they do. Anybody who's witnessed cancer up close, it is just horrific. It is horrific. What it does to the body, it's just inhumane. And to watch Ron, the way he fought through that, and was determined and realigned his hopes, his life, what would make him happy. He just wanted to be happy to have his voice so he could participate in services and do his job. Everyone knows he's a voiceover guy. I know we talk about his voice, and it's what he lived for, and he was good at it. And he loved to work with people who were good at it as well. Unfortunately, I thought a lot about this moment and wondered what I would say. And every single time I would try to think about what I would say, I would cry. I don't know if I've run out of tears, but I also have to thank another very special man. Before I get to him, everyone who's here, thank you. And I wish this could be filled with the thousands of people that I know would be here if we weren't in such extraordinary times. But the effort that all his friends made to come see him, to reach out to him, to offer and do things for him, the things people did for him when he was healthy. Barry, I know, I'm not here I would name names, but we'd be here all day. But the trips to Israel, that meant a lot to him. But all those friends that stopped by, even when he wasn't maybe conscious, if you didn't know it, there were times when we didn't think he could know you were there, and you'd walk in and he would perk up. And we had a Sunday where, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 people showed up, and he just was holding court. He went from, he was unconscious, and he was up, he's eating tuna and sitting, and everybody's sitting and talking, and and then they would leave, and that would be it. It was remarkable. He was remarkable, and everyone here knows that. I got to see in the most horrific of times the most amazing qualities, not only in the friendships. As close as I was to Ron, I didn't even know the extent to which he reached people. He made friends and became a mentor and a confidant and a teacher to people he met at the sushi bar, his favorite sushi bar. And if you were anybody, he would, come on, we're going for sushi. And so much so that it was such, by the way, it's excellent sushi and Makoto's. I was going to wear get some monetize this whole thing, but I thought that was crass. No. But seriously, Rin, the owner of the sushi joint, came to see him. It's remarkable. Come on, who does that, right? He came to see him, and it was the most remarkable words that came from me. He said, he's my best friend. And I can't even begin to recite all the, I texted people and had the unenviable task of trying to moderate the amount of people that came through the house in the time of COVID. We tried to shut it down for a while, and then we said, what are we doing? Ron didn't have a traditional family, but he made a family and community of all his friends. That's what you all were to him. You were his family. That was his family. So it was worth the risk to have everybody visit, even in these extraordinary times. So thank you. Thank you to everybody for being his family and being there for us and me and all those kind words and that support. And if I asked for the money that you all offered me, I'd be retired. But hold on, I may hold on to that card. The offers of spare rooms, just in case things go south. The fact that I'm standing here is testament that it's maybe the worst day of my life. But at the same time, it's the most it's the most amazing thing I've ever witnessed. To hear, it's like music, hearing the words. And I don't just mean the words of the people who do this for a living, but it comes from the heart, who've chosen to do this from the heart. But all the posts on Facebook, all the texts that I've received, I had to take Ron's phone at some point because he had so many. At some point, he could no longer respond. So I wanted to make sure that everybody that was reaching out to him knew that he knew. Because everyone who sent a message to him, I told him personally that you spoke to him. I read it where I could, but I let him know by name everybody that took the time to come see him, to reach out to him, to speak to him in any way, shape, or form, whether it was via email or text or chat or Google or I don't even know, pigeon, whatever. So everybody know that he knew. He knew. Even when he was sleeping, he knew he could hear. I believe he could hear us. And I made sure if you sent a video, I played it for him. So he heard it. I've got to check and see what I wrote. The rabbi said, make sure you write it down because you'll invariably forget. I didn't mean to actually put it on my phone because it's about the smallest writing you can possibly have. But due to circumstances, our printer was... excuse me for a moment here. So like I said, today's a day I dreaded for almost 2 years. Because my brother Ron Snow died on Thanksgiving morning after a long, painful, valiant battle with pancreatic cancer. I've spent a lot of time wondering. Ron's up there going, get to the microphone, you dummy. Wondering why such a good man was being put through such an awful ordeal. I still don't have the answer and probably never will. However, what I do know is that my brother Ron demonstrated more courage than I could imagine. For anyone who has had to watch a loved one die from cancer, they'll surely know the horrors it inevitably inflicts on them and their family. When I say family, and I've already touched on this, I mean not only his immediate family, but everyone here, everyone listening in, everyone joining us today. You are his family. Know that. And before I forget, because I'm about to go on, there's a gentleman out here. His name is Dr. Emmett Berg. And this is truly what Ron was about. Ron and Emmett have been friends for 30, 40 years. And Emmett goes back to the group of friends, the myriad ways that he made friends, but Emmett became his doctor. He became my doctor. Before I had health insurance, I used to corner Emmett at a party and say, hey, I got this. He'd take me to the bathroom and he'd go, drop your trousers, and you can figure out what that was. You know, it speaks to the difference time in the Me Too movement. It might have been a problem, but that's okay, Emmett. I trust you now, and we'll always trust you. Not many men have told me to drop my trowel at a party, and hold on, hang with me. I don't know what. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so Emmett wasn't just Ron's doctor, But when Ron got sick, Emmett was there and was working through the diagnosis, of course, and he had terrible stomach pains and he couldn't eat. And he was withering away, and we met Ron. I hadn't talked to him in a little bit and hadn't seen him in a little while, and Ron and I were celebrating one of our many anniversaries that we would celebrate with Ron, and we met him, of course, at Sushi. And I saw him and was a little shocked to see how thin he had become, and he just said, oh, well, I think it's diverticulitis, and that was end of March, almost a year and a half ago. And we went in and we had sushi, and but I know in that time they were trying to figure out what was going on, and I'll never forget the call that Ron was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And that's a pretty shocking moment, because it's about as worse. One of those, there's a few cancers that you just go, oh crap, just ain't gonna work. And not to minimize any cancers, but some of them you can go through treatments now, and there's a pretty good chance you can survive it. Pancreatic cancer is not one of them. And Emmett was there, I mean, literally by his side. Every step of the way, right to the end. Even when he was no longer the physician of record, he still came over at nights, and God bless him, he would call me and say, is it okay if I come by? I mean, there were a few people that had a backstage pass anytime. Emmett was certainly one of them. And God bless him. And they would come in and he would check his temperature and wash his hands and whatever. And and he would come on the weekends on his own time. On his own time. He was just a friend who happened to be a physician who cared so much about him that he wanted to be there. And that's the kind of friendships that Ron engendered. People would do anything for him because he would do anything for anyone else. And me personally, he was there for me always. From the day my dad died, he was hard on me, and I didn't like it. But he taught me, he was just teaching me to do the right thing. And my instinct was to push back and kick and scream. And I used to do it with Andrew and Rick out there, but I kind of stopped kicking and screaming there too. And it's amazing how much you can learn when you stop kicking and screaming and you accept it and you listen. So Ron taught me that. He saved my life, literally. I'm a sober alcoholic for 22 years. And we don't normally say that out loud. But I say it because it was Ron, when I was going to places that were unimaginable and probably on a path to kill myself, certainly to destroy my life. Ron intervened with Rhonda, and they confronted me, and Stevie sat there on a couch on a Saturday for hours trying to explain to me that smoking crack cocaine is not it's not a social endeavor. And I was convinced it was, that I was just a casual crystal meth user. But that's who I was at that moment. And they got me to go, they had it all set up, and they got me into rehab. I thought I was going for a 3-day evaluation, but it took a week for me to accept the program. And only after I was so disgusted with the whole thing that I didn't belong there, I called Ron, like I always did, to bail me out, to come get me. And this time he said no. He said, I can't come get you because I'm afraid you'll die if I do. And from that moment on, my life changed. It wasn't always easy, but Ron spent part of the program was another 6 months of family therapy, whatever. Ron showed up. He didn't have to. A single guy 23 years ago, he showed up. That's the kind of guy he was. And he continued to learn. He continued to learn. Turned my life around. And that's what Ron did for me. That's why I can stand here right now and have this conversation. I couldn't have done that. Now I'll go back to what I wrote. Ron defined friendship like no other. He was loyal, caring, empathetic, demanding, kind, honest, and a host of other adjectives that you just do not seem enough to capture the essence of Ron. And as I wrote that, I thought, oh, the essence of Ron, with his voice emceeing it, right? Oh, do the essence of Ron, especially in the holiday seasons when you see all those, a bunch of, forget it. That's just my mind. So, but that is the essence of Ron, and I think we all understand what that means. Ron played hockey, so I wanted to play hockey. I wanted to be just like Ron growing up. When we were younger, we grew up in a very Orthodox household in a neighborhood where everyone's doors were open. We would just walk in on the Sabbath and sit down. I mean, it was just like no other. That's just what we did. And all of Ron's friends, lived in the neighborhood, and I just tagged along with Ron. And I was just that pesky little brother that tagged along with Ron. And they wanted nothing to do with me. But I did because I wanted to be like him. He embodied what I thought a man should be. That's what I looked up to. He was my father figure. He was my idol. He seemed to have it all together. He seemed to be the smartest one in the room. I still think that. He was very mechanically inclined, as everyone who raised their hand out here understood, right? I heard someone say that you probably half the people standing here had their houses wired for sound. I got a new TV, come mount it for me. All of my house. He came to Texas when I lived in Texas and wired my house. and when Ron came and when Ron gave you his time, he was there 100%. He was just, you never felt like he had to rush off to somewhere else. That was an amazing thing because many of us are thinking about something else and we can see it. But Ron, he was there. He was there 100% for you. And I think that's why everyone knew he was his friend. Jake, Rachel, he loved you guys. He would talk about you all the time. Boy, did he love taking Jake to the lake, and he looked forward. He had just bought 2 brand new jet skis right before his diagnosis, and we were all excited to go out with him. That's where he would be right now in this weather. He'd be on the lake. That was so important to him. That crushed him when he missed that. How the heck with what I wrote. And he loved all his nieces and nephews, grandkids, and it tore him up that he couldn't be there for the last wedding. That was a tough one. But he was proud of all of them. All of them. I think I've said what I can say. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Rabbi, for being there, and everybody for coming. That's it. Thank you.
There's a tradition, a lesson in Judaism that says that parentage is not defined by biology. We don't look at our children based upon whether or not we gave birth to them. But our children are those people who are our students, those people who in some way we raise. Ron left so many students and so many children behind. And while he may not have had biologically children and grandchildren to remember him, we are here to do that. Ron's legacy is each and every one of us. Ron's legacy are the stories that we're going to tell. Ron's legacy is the reason why, although we're concluding the funeral now, we could stay here for hours more to tell stories about Ron Snow. And we're going to do that on Sunday through Thursday evening at 5:30 p.m. So please be present, because the stories that we tell, the memories that we share, becomes the living legacy of a great, great man. We rise at this time to offer prayers on Ron's beloved soul.
El male rachamim, shochein bamromim, hamenucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kedoshim utehorim, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת ראובן בן ציון בן אברהם אבא וחווה שהלכה לעולמו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of So in a few moments, we're going to have the family place some earth into the casket. Placing the earth into the casket is our way of gently covering our loved one with the same kind of chesed, of love and compassion that they gave to us throughout their lives. And so I'm going to ask, after the family does so, then for those of you who would like to also come forward and place some earth into, please do so. Just make sure either that you use some kind of gel over there on the table before you pick up or after you pick up the shovel, so that we don't pass germs, or these Lysol wipes to make sure that we are careful of one another. So that'll happen in just a few minutes. So you may notice that the wind just picked up. Did everybody pay attention to that? That Ron said, all right, enough is enough. It's time for you all to go. You have spent enough time talking about me, and that is more than enough. So we're gonna let these people finish, and we're gonna pause, and then we're gonna offer words of Kaddish in just a moment. And then after we offer words of Kaddish, a number of years ago, Ron was honored at Shomrei Torah Synagogue, as was referenced by a few people. And as also referenced at the end of that honor, he sang. And so we have the video. Jeff asked us if we could find it. We found it. And we're going to show that video as we conclude our service. So as soon as the last couple people put some earth in, then we're going to invite the family to rise to recite the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. And then I'm going to invite, can we hear it? Will we be able to hear the tribute here? Okay, so we'll hear the tribute here, and then we'll invite the family to return to their house. Ron had a very difficult time talking about and imagining his funeral, despite the fact that I tried to engage him in that conversation many times because of the reality of the situation. And one of the things that he did talk about is making sure that Cantor Jackie and Rabbi Sherman and Reb Hanan were here to share some words, but he also mentioned Porfirio Cortez, who is the lead custodian at Shomrei Torah Synagogue. He loved Porf like they were brothers. He had a very, very close relationship with him. And unfortunately, Porf is in San Diego. Otherwise, he would be here today because he felt the way about Ron, the way all of us feel about Ron. And as you said, Jeff, if not for the situation of COVID, there would be thousands of people gathered here to pay their respects to you all and to remember Ron. So we're going to rise for the Kaddish. Do we have, I think there are memorial books in that basket. Eugene, are there memorial books in the basket? Oh, you know it? Okay. All right. So don't worry, Eugene. We got it. So remembering Ron and his beloved and pure soul at this time, the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divrach yurtei v'amlich malchutei. B'chayachon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach leolam umei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran ve'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. V'yashov ha'afar al artz k'shaya v'harach teshuv Elohim asher natana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns unto God who gave it. May the soul of Reuven ben Sion ben Avraham Abba v'Chava be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Send comfort, O Lord, to those who mourn. Grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. O merciful Father, our refuge and our Redeemer. And let us say, Amen. We're going to hear the beautiful melody sung by Ron himself at that tribute, and then we are going to ask people to form kind of two lines so that the family can walk back to the car between those two lines. I'll explain that in a minute.
Thank you for being so warm. Together we've weathered a storm. You think you got a bargain, but I'm the one who got to start at the top and soar. happens every simcha, every Chag, every week. The time I spent here pays me back in so many ways, too numerous to turn into speech. So let's get one thing straight. If you arrive after brachot, you're late. I know that we've got a future together, so thanks for the honor. My family and friends, thank you, Shorei Torah. This is great.
Okay, so we're going to take a few steps this way. This was a tradition from many years ago where we would the way home so that they didn't have to be by themselves, and unfortunately during COVID it's more complicated. But you're going to take a few steps and then greet family, and we say to you as you walk, go ahead, Irma. Hamakom Yenachem Edchem Betoch Shar Avelei Tzion V'Yushalayim. May God comfort you together with all other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Okay, so that's good, because now make a left so that you can go down to the cart. Thank you all for being here, for being present to Ron's family, for showing your loving support, not just today, but for these past many months and years. And we hope you will continue to love Ron's family as you loved Ron. And God willing, we'll be able to gather to properly remember his life in the future. Thank you all.